Lily Moore stood in the shadow of the building, her thoughts as heavy as the darkening sky. It was more than just a physical place. This was where she had vowed to protect and serve the community, a promise she was struggling to uphold. For months, Lily had watched as corruption ran rampant within her own department, the very system she had worked to reform. She could feel it in every uneasy glance, every whispered conversation. The institution was fracturing, and with it, the trust of those she had sworn to protect. But Lily was not a woman to stand idly by. Behind her stoic exterior burned a fierce determination. She would fight for justice, even if it meant challenging the very system she had spent her career trying to fix. As the pressure mounted, so did her resolve. The corruption ran deep, rooted in a network of power-hungry individuals who had manipulated the system for years. The one at the center of it all was Jake Turner, a man whose charming smile masked his unscrupulous nature. He had come for Lily's reputation, launching a public smear campaign that painted her as an enemy of the very community she had worked tirelessly to serve. But this sentiment wasn't just his personal opinion. It was part of a larger, calculated strategy. Lily couldn't afford to let him win. That evening, she called together her most trusted allies, Thomas, Chris Meyer, and a few others who still believed in the mission. They had gathered every shred of evidence they could find, linking Jake to a network of corruption. The documents were damning, implicating not just him, but several high-ranking figures within the system. This wasn't just about exposing Jake. It was about dismantling the system that had allowed his kind to thrive unchecked for so long. "We can't let him control the narrative any longer," Lily said, her voice sharp with authority. "We need to bring the truth to light, but we must do it the right way. One wrong move, and everything we've worked for will serve his agenda." The team nodded in agreement, understanding the gravity of the situation. Thomas, always the realist, raised a concern. "With public opinion turning against you, how can we rebuild trust?" Lily met his gaze, her eyes unyielding. "We don't need to rebuild trust right away. What we need is the truth. And once it's out, the truth will speak for itself." In the days that followed, Lily's team worked tirelessly. They sifted through mountains of documents, ensuring every detail was verified. She reached out to trusted journalists, those who still believed in uncovering the truth, rather than chasing sensational headlines. Meanwhile, Jake escalated his campaign, holding press briefings where he painted himself as the victim, positioning Lily as the villain. But Jake's campaign was starting to show cracks. His overconfidence made him careless, and Lily's team was ready to expose him. They knew the time was fast approaching when they would strike, but they had to be prepared. This wasn't just about saving Lily's career. It was about tearing down a corrupt network that had held the city in its grip for too long. The battle lines were drawn, but Lily felt the weight of the situation more than ever. While Jake played the victim, she focused on the truth, knowing it would be the key to bringing the whole corrupt system crashing down. The moment of reckoning was drawing near. Every day, the walls seemed to close in a little tighter around her, and she could feel the tension in the air. But Lily refused to back down. She had a purpose, and she would see it through. Jake Turner arrived at the police station that morning with his usual cocky air of arrogance. But there was something different about him now. His smugness wasn't as strong as it used to be. Beneath his facade, a flicker of doubt had crept in. He knew what Lily had on him. The evidence was damning, and if it was revealed at the right moment, it could bring him to his knees. But Jake was no stranger to manipulation. He convinced himself that he could still control the narrative. Just one more move, he thought, and Lily wouldn't stand a chance. As Jake sat at his desk, the officers around him were uneasy. He could feel their sidelong glances, the tension thick in the air. He noticed their discomfort, but he brushed it off, telling himself that he was still in control. The battle was far from over, and he was ready to make his next move. Meanwhile, Lily was preparing for the moment that could change everything. She stood before the cameras at her press conference, a sea of reporters, photographers, and onlookers waiting for her to speak. In front of her, a thick folder lay on the table, the culmination of weeks of relentless work, a pile of evidence that would expose the corruption for all to see. Her heart pounded as she opened the folder, but her voice remained calm, steady, and unwavering. Today, I will reveal evidence proving that not just one individual, but an entire network has manipulated the justice system and abused their power for years. The room fell silent as Lily began presenting the evidence. She spoke of financial documents showing Jake's acceptance of bribes. She revealed internal emails that detailed his collusion with Mark Calloway to cover up misconduct. She exposed how Jake had abused his position, unlawfully arresting individuals and intimidating junior officers. But it wasn't just about Jake. Lily named higher-profile figures who had enabled this system, those who had shielded him and used him as a tool to maintain their power. Then came the most shocking revelation. Calloway had misappropriated community funds to finance illegal activities, including smear campaigns aimed at discrediting Lily and her team. The reporters erupted, bombarding her with questions, but Lily held her ground. "This is just the beginning," she declared, emphasizing that the evidence was only the tip of the iceberg. But as Lily made her announcement, the room erupted in chaos. A group of protesters stormed in, carrying signs that demanded justice for Jake Turner. They shouted slogans like "Justice for Jake" and "Fake Police Chief." They were there to support Jake, not Lily. The tension in the room was palpable as the protesters' anger grew, their voices rising with every minute. Lily remained unfazed. She stood tall and resolute, her voice cutting through the noise. "The truth is clear, and today, I will make it known." As she continued to speak, the door behind her opened and Jake himself walked in. He moved slowly, with a quiet confidence that belied the storm brewing inside him. He offered a mocking smile, his presence silencing the room. The tension in the air could be felt by everyone present. It was Jake's next move, and it was one that would determine the course of the battle. "Oh, Lily Moore," Jake's voice was low, dripping with sarcasm. "I never thought you'd go to such lengths to take me down." But Lily met his gaze, her eyes sharp and focused. "This isn't just about you, Jake. This is about people like you. Those who use power for personal gain instead of protecting the community." Jake chuckled, his expression cold. "You can try all you want, but you'll never bring down this system. I'm a part of it, Lily. And you're just an outsider." Lily's gaze didn't falter. She knew exactly what she was fighting for. "You're right, Jake. The system is bigger than both of us. But it only thrives because people like you exploit it for your own gain. I won't let that continue." Just as the standoff between them seemed to reach its breaking point, officers from the Internal Investigative Unit entered. Their arrival shattered the tense silence. "Jake Turner, you're under arrest for bribery, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice," one officer declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. Jake's face froze, his confidence faltering for the first time. His eyes locked on Lily, and he sneered, "You think you've won, but this game isn't over yet." As he was led away, Jake threw one last defiant glare at Lily, but she remained composed, her steely gaze following him out of the room. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on her. This was a small victory, but the real fight was far from over. News of Jake Turner's arrest spread like wildfire through the city. Reactions were mixed. To some, Lily was a hero, a beacon of justice who had taken down a man who had long evaded accountability. But others saw her as a threat to the status quo. Critics accused her of going too far, of turning the very institution she had sworn to protect against itself. And there were those who questioned how Jake had managed to operate unchecked for so long, wondering how deep the corruption really went. Meanwhile, Mark Calloway and the other high-ranking officials implicated in the investigation felt the heat of their own involvement. Desperate to conceal their wrongdoing, they scrambled to destroy any evidence that might tie them to the corrupt network. But Lily was prepared. She acted swiftly, ensuring that their attempts to bury the truth were thwarted before they could gain any real traction. Still, Lily knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was fraught with challenges. The entrenched forces of corruption weren't going to be easily dismantled, and the backlash she was already facing was only going to intensify. But she had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. The real fight was just beginning. As the days went by, Lily took decisive steps to rebuild trust within her department and with the community. She initiated a series of critical reforms: transparency in the handling of complaints, a renewed focus on ethical training, and public forums designed to engage with the people she served. Each effort was a small but vital piece of the larger puzzle. At a community meeting, a man stood up and asked a question that was blunt but necessary. "We've lost faith in you people a long time ago," he said. "How can you guarantee this won't happen again?" Lily's response was measured, but it carried the weight of her conviction. "I can't change the past," she said quietly, "but I promise that anyone who makes a mistake, including myself, will be held accountable." Her words didn't earn applause, but the attentive silence that followed was telling. It was a step toward rebuilding the fractured trust between the community and the police force. It was a small victory, but it was one that carried the potential for much bigger change. Late one night, after a long day of meetings and briefings, Lily sat alone in her office. The city stretched out before her, its lights twinkling in the distance like a living, breathing entity. Her mind wandered to her grandmother Evelyn's words, which had been her guiding light through this entire ordeal. "Justice isn't something you wait for. You fight for it." Those words rang in her mind as she gazed out at the city. She knew that she wasn't finished yet. There was still so much work to be done, but she was no longer afraid of the challenge ahead. She could see the path clearly now, and she was ready to walk it. In the days that followed, the police station itself began to visibly transform. Ethical training programs were implemented. Citizen complaints were handled with transparency. Morale among the officers began to recover, and the shift in culture was evident. The once silent halls of the precinct were now filled with quiet laughter, the kind that had been missing for far too long. Chris Meyer, once a symbol of silence within the force, became one of the strongest voices for change. He had watched Lily closely during the most difficult moments, and now, with newfound resolve, he visited her in her office one afternoon. "You've changed not just this station, but me," Chris said with a sincerity Lily hadn't seen in him before. "I used to think I was just a cog in the machine, but now I realize that every action matters. Thank you for not giving up, even when I didn't dare to stand by you." Lily smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "I didn't do this alone, Chris. Everyone here, including you, is part of this change. This is a collective effort." Her words weren't just a reassurance. They were the truth. Every officer, every member of her team, had played a part in the transformation. The station was no longer just a place to work. It had become a symbol of something bigger. It was a place where integrity was no longer a rare commodity. It was the foundation of everything they did. At another community meeting, a woman who had once been one of Lily's harshest critics stood up and spoke with a quiet humility. "I wasn't sure I believed in you when you first started," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But now I see the difference. Thank you for facing what others avoided." The room was silent as the woman's words hung in the air. For Lily, it was a moment of profound validation. It wasn't about winning approval or earning applause. It was about showing people that real change was possible, that integrity and transparency could overcome even the darkest corners of corruption. As the holidays drew near, the station held its final meeting of the year. The room was a mix of seasoned veterans and fresh recruits, all of them now united under the banner of justice and reform. Lily stood before them, taking a deep breath before she began. "We've endured tough times," she said, her voice resolute but empathetic. "Not just external challenges, but internal struggles with ourselves. What we've accomplished isn't just about fixing a broken system. It's about rebuilding trust." She paused, letting her words settle. "We're doing this not just for ourselves," she continued, "but for the community that has entrusted us with their protection. Justice isn't a destination. It's a journey that requires people like us to keep striving. We will make mistakes, but what matters is how we face them and make amends." Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. There was a quiet understanding, a shared commitment to the long road ahead. Later that evening, Karen, a longtime resident who had been one of Lily's fiercest critics at earlier community meetings, appeared at her office door. She was hesitant at first, gripping her handbag tightly, but she had something important to say. "Chief," Karen's voice trembled. "I thought you were just another person pretending to care, like so many before you. I didn't think you truly cared about us." She paused, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. "But I was wrong. You helped my son avoid a terrible mistake. You didn't just help him. You helped me see that not everyone in this station is bad." Lily listened, her expression softening. "Thank you, Karen. That means more to me than you'll ever know." Before she left, Karen clasped Lily's hand. "Don't stop, Chief. We need you." Jeff, the officer who had betrayed Lily in the past, appeared in the doorway next. His voice was hesitant, full of remorse. "I know I was wrong," he said quietly. "I have no excuse. But I want to be part of the change you're making. I want to fix what I broke." Lily studied him for a long moment. The man standing before her was not the same person who had once helped Jake try to destroy her. He had changed, but she knew that change wasn't just about words. It was about actions. "Actions speak louder than words, Jeff," Lily said firmly. "If you're truly committed to change, you'll get the chance to prove it. But I need your full commitment." Jeff nodded, his eyes full of determination. "I'm committed," he said, his voice steady. "Thank you for not turning your back on me." The room fell silent, but it wasn't with fear or doubt. It was with a quiet consensus, a shared understanding that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt one step at a time. The officers who had once stood apart from Lily now saw her not as an outsider, but as a leader who was willing to fight for them, just as much as she was fighting for the community. As Lily stood alone in her office that night, reflecting on everything she had accomplished, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Her grandmother had been right. Justice wasn't something you wait for. It's something you fight for. And for Lily, the fight was far from over. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind for Lily. Every step she took, every move she made, was scrutinized not just by her colleagues, but by the very community she had vowed to serve. But the pressure didn't break her. It fueled her. The small victories, like the public forums, the officers' renewed commitment to ethics, and the restored faith of some of the community members, kept her going, reminding her why she couldn't stop now. One crisp morning, as Lily walked into the precinct, she was met with a message that would change the course of her mission. It was from an anonymous source, someone within the department, a whistleblower. The message was short but clear. "There's more. Trust no one." Lily's heart skipped a beat. The weight of the words sank in, but she wasn't naive. She had known that the corruption she had exposed was only the surface of something much larger. Now, the challenge was bigger than she had imagined. There were more players in the game, more people who had their hands dirty, and it was going to take everything she had to root them out. With renewed urgency, she called a private meeting with her trusted officers, including Chris, Evelyn, and a few others who had proven themselves loyal. She needed to be strategic. This wasn't just about taking down bad apples. It was about dismantling an entire system of corruption. "I got a message this morning," Lily began, her voice steady but tinged with a fierce determination. "There's more to this than we thought. We need to dig deeper, but we have to be careful. Whoever is behind this is trying to protect their own." The room went silent as the weight of Lily's words sank in. But Chris was the first to speak, his voice resolute. "We've come this far. We won't back down now." The plan was set into motion quickly. Information was gathered, leads were followed, and undercover operations were initiated. It was a tense time, but the team was united in their resolve. No matter the cost, they would expose the truth. And the truth came at a cost. One evening, as Lily was reviewing documents in her office, the door swung open. It was Jeff. He was visibly shaken, his hands trembling. He'd come across something that tied Mark Calloway to a major cover-up. His face was pale as he handed over the file. "It's bigger than I thought," Jeff said, his voice low and trembling. "I didn't know, Lily. I didn't know it went this far. But I can't ignore it now. We have to do something." Lily's eyes scanned the file, her heart racing as she pieced together the puzzle. This wasn't just about police corruption. This was about a web of deceit stretching across multiple agencies, a network of power that had been manipulating the system for years. Mark Calloway, along with several others, had orchestrated a series of cover-ups, all designed to keep the truth hidden. The stakes had just gotten much higher. Lily knew that exposing this would bring unimaginable backlash. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. But she also knew that the truth was worth the fight. The next few weeks were a blur of intense investigations and high-stakes decisions. As Lily pushed forward, there were moments of doubt. But with each small victory, she was reminded why she had started this journey in the first place. Her community deserved better. Her officers deserved better. And she wasn't going to stop until justice had its day. One day, as Lily was walking through the precinct, a familiar voice called out to her. It was Evelyn. "Lily," Evelyn said, her voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking about something." Lily stopped and turned to face her. "What is it?" Evelyn looked around, ensuring no one was listening before she spoke. "You've done more than I ever thought possible. But there's something you need to understand. It's not just about taking down the people who are wrong. It's about building something better, something that lasts." Lily took a deep breath, processing her grandmother's words. "I know," she said quietly, "but I have to expose the truth first. Only then can we build something better." Evelyn smiled, her eyes full of pride. "I think you've already started building it, Lily. With every decision, every action, you're laying the foundation for the future." The investigation reached its boiling point when the evidence they had gathered was enough to implicate several high-ranking officials in the corruption ring. Mark Calloway, along with others involved in the scandal, was arrested. The city buzzed with shock, disbelief, and in some corners, a sense of relief. But Lily knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of true reform. The arrest was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The public had to be reassured, the faith in the system had to be restored. It was going to take years, not months, for the damage to be fully undone. But with each day, the foundation of trust was slowly being rebuilt. The final community meeting of the year came around, and this time, the room was different. There was a sense of cautious optimism, a feeling that change was in the air. People who had once looked at Lily with suspicion now regarded her with something closer to respect. The woman who had dared to challenge the system was now a symbol of hope. Lily stood before them, her heart heavy but resolute. "We've been through a lot together," she began, her voice strong. "And while we've made great strides, our work is far from over. True justice isn't just about removing the bad apples. It's about ensuring the system is strong enough to prevent them from growing in the first place." The room nodded in agreement, a collective recognition that the fight for justice wasn't a one-time victory. It was a continuous journey, one that demanded constant vigilance. As the meeting came to a close, Lily made her way to the front of the room. People were coming up to her, offering their thanks, sharing their hopes for the future. And for the first time in a long while, Lily felt that familiar sense of peace. Not the peace of complacency, but the peace of knowing she had done the right thing. The peace of knowing that, together, they could make a difference. The road ahead was long, and the fight for justice would continue to demand everything she had. But for Lily Moore, the journey was just beginning. What would you do if you were in Lily's shoes? Would you risk everything to fight for the truth, even when it feels like the odds are against you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's continue the conversation on how we can all be part of the change we want to see in the world. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can make a difference, starting with ourselves. Thank you for being with us on this journey. We'll see you in the next chapter.